Today, we're going to be discussing the concept of how to maintain a growth mindset when talking to your kids. As parents, it's natural to praise outcomes and big wins, like finally being able to ride a bike, winning first place in an art contest, or getting selected for an elite sports team. But what about the in between? The failures, the frustration when learning a new skill, the giving up? How can we help our kids navigate this phase? Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Dr. Courtney, a licensed clinical and educational psychologist. With me, as always, is my husband, Scott. Scott, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm excited to get into this stuff. I like thinking about growth mindset things personally, whether or not it's like explicitly stated as such. I think that's just kind of what I naturally gravitate towards. This
Yeah.
this feeling that you're always capable of changing what's not good or improving yourself in all these various ways. So I'm excited to dive into what that means for kids, because I know what that means for me is downloading some audiobooks and some podcasts and all that stuff. And I would assume that's not what you do for kids here.
No, that's definitely not how you introduce the concept of a growth mindset. But what I think you are onto here is that it does come from parents, as we'll learn today, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I do think that seeing, the way my parents operated and the way they valued their, career or, just in general improving their lives in various ways did shape how I saw that I could change and improve mine. So I love to hear some strategies here.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think you are an inspirational person for
Oh,
this, especially because
well,
you
thank
are
you.
an entrepreneur and you took a lot of big risks and you've had a lot of failures along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think every failure is important because they do teach you all kinds of things. And I do think my brain helps me take a lot of big risks because I don't necessarily think things through completely
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's the key to that ADHD brain, right? You're not necessarily
Yeah.
thinking about
Uh,
what could happen or kind of like predicting future outcomes. It's more of like, well, just let's just try it and see what happens, being more focused on the present, generally
yeah.
speaking.
I love that.
I love that too. Well, let's get into the science behind growth mindset before we get into really how we implement it as parents. So, we'll start with Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck is a prolific psychologist over at Stanford, and she is, kind of like the champion of mindset psychology and understanding failure. And really, this concept of growth mindset came about from her research over like decades.
Mm.
So she's a big deal over at Stanford. And I remember learning about her when I was in graduate school. So we love Carol Dweck. So in 1998, she and Mueller did a study. It was a series of 6 studies actually involving fifth graders. And the kids worked on different problems, and they were either told, you must be smart at this, like when they were finished,
Hmm.
or you must have worked really hard,
Oh, I see what you mean. Like,
right?
oh, you're so smart at math versus, oh, you worked really hard on this math.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
exactly. Um, and so I'm going to summarize some key findings from this. So if you're interested in the whole study, you'll have to go back, but some key findings. So which one, Scott, just in listening to this, would you predict would have better outcomes? That you're so smart at this, or you must have worked really hard?
Well, I don't feel like I'm impartial here because we did talk briefly about this yesterday,
Okay, sure.
not yesterday, but in the last episode that came out, which I will say, uh, the uh, the you tried so hard at this.
Okay, well, you would be right if you
I'm
said that
paying
one.
attention, I think.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that. So the kids that were praised for their intelligence, so that you must be so smart at this, they were found to choose tasks that were either like easier afterwards, so tasks that they knew they would have success in, right? That's like doing kind of the 50cc Mario Kart when you can try which the top one, 150?
Yeah, 150 is
Right. So
yeah.
doing like the 50 and kind of knowing like, yeah, I'm going to be good at this, right? I'll probably win here. While kids praised for their effort chose harder tasks, right? So they
Uh-huh.
had more confidence going into tasks that they might not succeed. So
Interesting.
that's key. After hitting failure, the intelligence praised kids fell apart. So once they did fail at a task, they had a really hard time keeping it together and staying resilient. Whereas the kids that were effort praised tended to improve after failure. So really interesting there.
That makes a lot of sense. Because if you think about it, what you are, if you're praising their, you must be, or you did so good at this, then they're going to want that specific praise. They're going to want to
Yeah.
hear that I'm so good at this. And then therefore, they're only going to do things that get them that type of praise, right?
Right, right. So they're
Huh.
seeking out tasks that will lead to success,
That makes a lot of sense.
right? But when you think about like life, right, and being a successful adult, you're not guaranteed successful results all the time, right? You
No.
need to have that resilience. So that's part of the growth mindset concept. So intelligence praised kids often attributed their failures to a lack of ability. So rather than like that was too hard or I wonder if I try again I might do better, they thought, well, I'm just not smart enough, right? So they associated failure with their intelligence, whereas the other children did not. So the effort praised kids attributed failure with just not trying hard enough. So more about effort than intelligence, and kind of understanding too that it was within their control. The last piece, and this is kind of tied to that, is the intelligence praised kids saw intelligence as fixed instead of malleable. And what this study showed us is that our approach to praise as parents really changes the ways that kids approach challenges, how they handle failure, and then how they think about their own intelligence. Right. So this kind of birthed the concept of the growth mindset, which is that obviously you want to praise your kids, right, for doing hard things. But instead of focusing on the outcome, right, the A plus, the first place, right, the intelligence piece, you want to focus more on the effort. Like, wow, you worked so hard, right? Or tell me about your process, right? Or I love all the colors you used. Tell me about why you chose those colors, right? So focusing on the process.
What if you were like, wow, you did so amazing because you worked so hard, or you worked so hard and because of that you did amazing?
That's probably okay. It's that piece of emphasizing that the outcome was because of the effort
Gotcha.
and not because of their intelligence or their like innate capability.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're right. You're not saying you are good at this or whatever. You're saying you tried really hard and therefore the result was good. Yeah, okay.
Right,
That
right.
feels
Because
different.
essentially, here's the concept of the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, which is what we'll get into here in the next study, is that the growth mindset is the idea that there's neuroplasticity, right? We know this. Even as like older adults, you can still learn and change and grow. Your brain can adapt to new situations and it can create new neural pathways to learn new skills. Right. And that's
So is that
really what
real?
we're teaching here.
Is neuroplasticity real? Because
Yeah,
that's like one of those
absolutely.
things that you see in marketing all the time. I wasn't sure if that was actually like a real
It
concept.
is real, but there's a caveat here, which is you see a lot of like brain games, and I try to warn parents about these, like brain games about, oh, you can improve your memory or you can improve your processing speed or your child specifically with these brain games that are sold out there. And that doesn't tend to generalize into real life, right? So typically you tend to improve on those games or activities that you're doing, right? And you see results there that are tangible, but those results do not generalize into the real world. So it's kind of like a sunk cost or
Yeah.
like wasted time and money.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
totally.
But absolutely, the brain is malleable and adaptable. And, you can be like, for example, like have a negative mindset or a glass is half empty mindset throughout your life. And then perhaps if you go to therapy and you learn new skills to change that, you can switch, and become more positive,
Yeah.
And think differently. And that's what we're talking about here is that your brain does not have to be fixed. And it's not just about intelligence, but it can be about like how you approach tasks, your social skills, right? Or just kind of your perspective on the world that can change at any point in time, right? So
Yeah.
neuroplasticity is absolutely
I think I made a switch there at some point because I think I was somewhat negative at some point in my life, and I don't think you've ever known me to be negative.
No,
Maybe
that's surprising when you told me, actually.
yeah, I think I made a concerted effort for this, but this was probably a while ago, and it's just like to me now I'm almost the opposite to a fault, where I'm not able to see the realist perspective sometimes, but it does be helpful for being ambitious in certain things for certain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So here's our next study. It's 2016 from Heimovitz and Dweck. And this time, instead of looking at the kids, they looked at parent factors. So, how the parents viewed intelligence. So, did they have a growth mindset towards intelligence, right?
Mm,
Meaning that the brain is adaptable, it can change. And, you just haven't achieved those results yet, but with effort, you can. Or is it fixed, right? So, either like I'm smart or I'm not. I can do it or I can't, right? So, more rigid in that way.
yeah.
So how they viewed intelligence and then how they viewed failure. Is it debilitating, right? Which is like the worst thing in the world. If I fail, like nothing is worse than that. Or is it enhancing? Like, I learned something here,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
So how did parents view intelligence? And then how did they view failure? Now, without looking ahead, what do you think these results would be?
Oh gosh. Um,
Which do you think the parent or the kids pick up on, the intelligence or the failure? Which do you think would be more important in parenting?
the failure?
Why? Why do you say that?
I don't know. I don't. I feel like I've overthought this.
Well, I want to hear it. Why?
I think about like what you've been saying in terms of what kids latch onto versus what they don't.
Okay.
So if you're celebrating that failure aspect of things, then they would see that as being like a part of normal life. I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know if I have a good answer.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely on the right track, and that is the right answer.
Okay.
Is that your attitude towards failure tends to be more impactful on kids than your attitude towards intelligence or your views on intelligence.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
let's break this down. So parents' intelligence mindsets, so whether it was growth mindset or fixed, didn't necessarily predict their kids' um, views on intelligence, right? So
Yeah.
not to say that it's not important, but in terms of like parenting, it didn't have like a significant impact on how their kids viewed their intelligence.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. What did predict their kids' mindsets is how the parents viewed the failure. So just as you predicted.
Yeah.
Right. So if parents saw failure as debilitating, like, oh my gosh, that was the worst thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
Then their kids were more fixed in their mindset.
Gotcha.
So they
Yeah.
were more rigid.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Right. So then their view towards failure is, oh, if I fail, I must not be smart. Right. So you can
Mhm.
see how the two are like connected here.
Oh yeah. No, it feels directly connected now that you say that. I do say, or I do think in like my personal experience with our kids, that some of that feels like, even though I am kind of constantly pushing that it's okay to fail, that like almost I feel like both of the kids kind of naturally gravitate towards that it's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's obviously probably a genetic component as well. But here in this study, they found that there was like a stronger correlation. And again, this is important to keep in mind with research. I think hopefully we all know this at this point, but correlation doesn't equal causation, right? So it doesn't mean that it caused kids to have a certain mindset, but there was like a tendency. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In correlation does not equal causation. I know that that feels like it's something that is said to death, but I do feel like that is like one of the number one, I don't know if you'd call that a fallacy or whatever, that people get wrong when they're looking at information. So can you
Yeah.
just make that really clear what that is exactly?
Right. So typically with studies, you're finding correlational outcomes, meaning that it's more likely or more probable to have that certain outcome, right? Causation means it definitively caused this thing to happen
Hmm.
or this will be the imminent outcome, right? And that's not what most research is indicating. It's usually a correlational cause. And there's like a lot of stats and probability and things behind that we don't need to get into necessarily, but it is important to note that it's more of like an association or likelihood
Yeah.
and not necessarily like a direct outcome.
Right. So what you're saying is just because something seems like it's the case because of the data doesn't always mean it's directly causing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So again, if the Parents saw failure as debilitating. Kids were more fixed in their mindset. However, if they saw failure as enhancing, meaning like a learning opportunity, or which I think makes sense,
Yeah.
kids leaned more towards a growth mindset,
Mm.
right? So it's all about this idea of challenges, right? And can my brain adapt and learn and shift and eventually reach that outcome? Or am I just not capable because I failed the first time? Right. So that's what we're talking about here with a fixed and a growth mindset. And typically with a growth mindset, we're talking about this concept of yet, right? Which I love,
Yeah.
and I try to instill that in the kids, but, it takes a lot of reps. But it's the power of yet. So saying, oh, I haven't done it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so our daughter, for example, is learning how to roller skate. And I forgot how hard it is to roller skate
Oh,
or
yeah.
to learn how to do that. Do you remember? I mean, in the 90s, like we were just roller skating everywhere.
Oh,
or
yeah.
blading, roller skating at the
Totally.
rink. That was just a part of life. And she's gotten really into roller skating lately, and she's having a hard time just with that like balance and the coordination. And she takes dance and gymnastics and all these different things. But this is like such a challenging new skill for her. She gets all of her gear on. We're out there for like a minute or two, and she just has a hard time because it's so challenging. But we've been really instilling in her, like, you haven't gotten it yet,
Oh, yeah.
right? And with time, with practice, you will get there, right? And that's the concept of a growth mindset. Whereas a fixed mindset, she could just have a hard time. She could fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would say, oh, this is dumb. This is terrible. I'm never going to get this, right? And then just give up. And that's what we're trying to prevent here, right? We want our kids to be resilient, especially because, we know life is challenging and you can't predict the future, and you have to be able to deal with and navigate challenging situations, because we know, as much as we hate to see it, like our kids will fail time and time again.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But that's how you learn. That's how you
hopefully
grow.
they fail time and time again, and just hopefully they
Right.
are
Of
able
course.
to learn from that instead of be shut down from it. I like the yet thing. I think I need to implement that more beyond just saying like, keep trying, you'll do it,
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm really excited to get, I got some rollerblade wheels from my old rollerblades, and I'm
You're
going
gonna
to
get
go.
out there with her?
Oh, you bet I am.
I
Yeah,
love
I'm
that.
stoked about it.
I don't know if you put rollerblades on me, if like how I would do. Is it like riding a bike where it would just come back, or would I struggle?
Yeah, we'll see for me. I mean, I was always competitive. I was going down ramps and half pipes backwards. I was doing 540s and grinding rails and stuff. So for me, I'm operating from the assumption that I was so good at it that there's no chance that it won't be like riding a bike. But I am ready to be humbled, I suppose.
Yeah. I think if I were to go out there, I would do all the gear. The tailbone protector, the elbow, wrist guards, all the things, because at almost 40, it falls like pretty disastrous.
Oh yeah,
Or can be anyway.
Yeah,
See, there's
totally.
my fixed mindset there.
Yeah.
I need to switch there. So other things we learned from that 2016 study, of course, kids could accurately perceive their parents' failure mindsets, but not necessarily their intelligence mindsets, right? So how you project your thoughts on failure, even in your own life, is critical for kids, because we know, as we have talked about before, that kids don't always listen to what you say,
Mm-hmm.
but they always pick up on what you do, right? So they're always watching you, and they learn so much from what you're doing, and
Yeah.
they implement that in themselves. So that's really important, keeping that failure mindset to be more flexible, which is hard.
Yeah. I think me being who I am, I think it's good for me to teach that kind of thing just kind of naturally. Just being like, oh, well, this didn't work. Let's try this. Let's, improve this. Let's learn from this. And I think it's just kind of how I operate in general, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Um,
See, I'm kind of the opposite. Well, I'm definitely the opposite. I have a hard time with failure. I do,
Yeah.
because I am very much like an achievement-oriented kid and an individual, or was an achievement-oriented kid. And now as an individual, I'm trying to change some of those tendencies in myself, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So we have both sides of the spectrum over here.
Yeah. It's so funny. I started my YouTube channel back in 2012, and I just made a lot of videos. I was at one point, I was making like 9 videos a week, and every single time one didn't get any views, which was most of the time at the start, the thought process there was never, ever, all right, you shouldn't be doing this. No one's paying attention. It was just you keep going, you tweak, you optimize, you improve, and you're rolling a small snowball down the hill. And I would love to do projects with the kids to instill that in them.
Yeah, I think we need a seminar from you.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so let's talk about the different phases of childhood and how this might show up. So in preschool, kids at this phase of development, they're absorbing a lot of like emotional cues about failure, and they start to tie it into their self-worth. So they're not necessarily articulating it or even insightful enough to understand, but they're definitely picking up on it even at a really early age. So a fixed mindset, if you're parenting, it might sound like, oh, you're such a good girl, or, oh,
Hmm.
what a great boy you are, or good job, right? And we, as parents, we want to try to avoid that as much as possible, the labels of good or bad or smart. And instead, we want to talk about the process of what they did. Also, it's helpful to let them struggle a little bit on tasks rather than jumping into the rescue. And I think
Yeah.
that is a big thing at this stage where you're always wanting to jump in to the rescue because, kids are, a lot of times getting into things, getting into trouble, or they're having like big reactions to things that are going wrong. And it can be kind of natural as a parent to want to just jump in and fix it, right? But we want to try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, when you say avoid labels, does that include the label of like hard worker? Because I found that I gave myself at some point, or somebody instilled upon me that label of like I'm a hard worker, and that to me has kind of pushed me through in all kinds of things, whether that's sports or any of this stuff, as being like a good identity piece to like I can do this. I'm a hard worker if I push through it.
Yeah. Well, I think as labels go, like that's not a terrible one. That's
Yeah.
that's a nice label, but I think in general you want to try to avoid labels as much as possible.
Okay.
Right? You want the kids to kind of figure out what their own labels are for themselves rather than assigning them a label.
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So at this stage, you're talking about like, let's imagine they're building a block tower, a Lego tower. You might say like, oh, you worked so hard on that tower. Look at how tall it is.
Yeah.
Right? Or tell me about this drawing. There's so many interesting colors. Right? So you're having the kid comment on their process and really praising them for that effort, but not saying, wow, you are, like we said, a hard worker,
Mm.
or wow, you are so smart.
So you are is the problem here.
Maybe not directly, but
Okay.
yeah, I think, that would come out that way for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So assigning those labels, we want to try to avoid that as much as possible.
So is this a bad thing to do for our dogs as well? We often say good boy, good girl. Do we have to? Wow, you worked so hard on that bone.
Yeah, I don't think, sadly for the dogs, we love our dogs. We think they're so smart. We think they're the best, right?
We do.
But I think intellectually this does not apply to
Okay.
dogs. So good
explains a lot,
boy,
yeah.
good girl. I think that's fine. They love that. The
They
dogs
do.
love that. No, we're talking strictly humans here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then in elementary school, the kids start to become more insightful, like particularly around age 7. And they start to develop more explicit beliefs about their intelligence, and they're more aware of how they are comparing themselves to other kids in the class, right? So I'm not as smart as them, or I don't read as well as them, or he's better at sports than me, or she's prettier than me,
Mm.
right? So you start to see a lot of that comparison in elementary school, and it really comes to fruition. So again, the labels really stick here, and here in particular, if you were doing the labeling and the intelligence praise in preschool, but you have an elementary age child, now would be a good time to try and adjust
Yeah.
when possible. So there's, again, we're talking about the power of yet, right? And malleability. It's always okay to shift at any point, even if you've been doing this from day one, that's okay. So the labels really stick here, right? So this is maybe where you started to realize like you're a hard worker, Scott.
Yeah.
For me, it was because I really thrived on doing well in school. So it was like, oh, you're a really smart kid,
Mhm.
right? Or you always get A's, and I was always praised from the teachers as being um, just a good kid,
Yeah.
right? Like not like a teacher's pet, but I was definitely like that kid that was like always trying to please and do her best and to like get those good stars or the gold stars, not the good stars. Right. So here again, you want to praise the process of what your kids are doing. And I think now more than ever, it's more important to normalize mistakes, right? And then model your own learning. So we try to, in our dinner meetings, talk about things that have gone wrong, or, if our kids are going through something and maybe they'd made a big mistake and they're really upset, I try to think back to my childhood of when I made a similar mistake, and they love that,
Mm,
knowing like, oh, I'm not a bad kid, right? This is just part of being a kid, is making mistakes. Like mom did it too
yeah.
when she was a kid, and I can like kind of laugh at what she did and know that, it's okay that I made a mistake too.
Yeah, I do think that has been effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then in middle and high school, the fixed mindset just becomes more solidified if it's already there. So at this point, it starts to predict things like declining grades. Like if kids think, oh, I'm just not smart enough, or I'm the dumb kid, or I'm the bad kid, I always get into trouble.
Mm,
So their achievement and then their engagement in school, right? And this is when we see like um, kids starting to skip school, right? Or not graduating, kids getting into like more behavioral, like bad outcomes, right? So the fixed mindset is really, really critical here. And it starts to predict things like their effort and their outcomes. So it's really important always to stay connected to your kids. So instead of like lecturing them, right? We try to talk a lot about this here, is that the lecturing, it doesn't always like sink in or resonate,
yeah.
right? So we want to talk about the concept of growth mindset and how they're not stuck, rather than lecturing them on what did they do wrong, right? Or what could they have done better,
Mm,
right? We want to instill that belief and resilience that they can always turn it around, right? It's in their hands, it's in their control, right? And sometimes that might mean different things for different kids, right? Not all kids will succeed with the same supports. Kids need different levels of supports, especially our neurodivergent kids, right? Which we'll talk about too. But just having that understanding that the brain is malleable and they can always do better at any point in time. They can always turn it around.
yeah. I do. I love that message. Like, you are always capable of changing anything that you don't like about yourself or anything that you're doing. You can change those things. Uh, and a lot of people, adults, don't feel that way. I think that's an
Right.
important
Yeah.
message. So it's very, very possible. You just need to, uh, I guess, be thoughtful about it, and you need to identify what it is you would like to be, and change that mindset. Now, granted, these are high school and middle school kids, so that's like different to break in there. But I do think that
Right.
message is something that I do talk about a lot throughout the house. So
Right. Yeah. Well, and again, it starts with you as the parent, right?
yeah.
Because I can't control what my kid thinks. I just cannot,
Hmm.
right? But there is a correlation, as we said, to the types of thinking and resilience that I'm modeling at home in my own life, both for them and for myself. And in turn, your kids will likely adapt a lot of that mindset, right? And that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Okay. So again, why this is important for the fixed mindset kids, in addition to like declining grades, disengagement in school, a lot of times as like teens or adults, they avoid tasks that are hard for them. So they may stay in their comfort zone. They might not challenge themselves, and those are things that obviously we don't want as adults. They're more likely to give up quicker. They tend to have less enjoyment in life. Their stress response is a lot of times higher, and they have higher levels of cortisol because when they face problems or challenges, they're more likely to automatically think, I'm not going to be able to handle this, right? Because they have that fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And then we tend to see, in addition, increased levels of things like anxiety,
Hmm.
depression, more aggression and distress when they're rejected by their peers, right? Which is going to happen. All these things, it's just life, right?
Yeah.
It's just life,
Y-
but if you have a fixed mindset, the kids are not able to handle these challenges with life as well as the kids that have the growth mindset.
So what you're saying is you're not fixing the stressors or the challenges of life.
Right. No.
You're giving them the tools to be able to handle those things better than someone who doesn't. That
Right. And
cool. Yeah.
again, as parents, we know it's so hard to watch your kids struggle, to watch them flounder, to watch them go through something uncomfortable like a breakup or getting a bad grade on a test or, failing in a big game or something like that, but you can't do anything about that. That is unfortunately just life,
Yeah.
right? Those failures will happen, is what I mean. So we want to give our kids the tools to be able to be resilient and to not give up, right? Or lead down that anxiety or depression pathway, as can happen. But we want to help them be able to navigate those challenges and to stay resilient and know, like, okay, well, that didn't work. Obviously that didn't work, or, that friendship didn't work out, or, what can I do to repair, right? So we want them to be able to learn from their mistakes and then get up and try again,
Yeah.
right? That's the whole message of life, right?
Totally. Yeah. So what can we actually do as parents to promote this?
Yes. Okay. So first, obviously, we want to praise the process, right? I think we've been hammering that in,
Yes.
right? So praising their strategy, their effort, their choices, right? And not the outcome.
Yeah. I think we also want to have you, like you have listed here, is normalize struggle. Like,
Yeah.
as in, life will be challenging. Mom and dad, we face challenges. And you know what we do when we face challenges? We, we don't give up. We work hard. We do our best. But life will not be without challenges.
Right. And I think, again, talking about your day to day struggles or things that happened in your childhood is so helpful, like we talked about. Even as adults, you can say, like, I had this project at work and it was a big failure,
Yeah.
right? Here's what I learned from it. And they understand that this is normal, even for mom and dad.
When our son was, kind of reflecting on some of his challenges with his ADHD, I think for me that was a good moment to be like, "Hey, bud, like I struggle with the same stuff.
Yeah.
Like I have these same challenges. It's hard, but you also have superpowers. You can do this, you can do that, and you can work through these things, and you can make this or that better. But it's not just you. You're not facing these challenges. It's a lot of people facing these challenges.
Right. Right. So normalizing the struggle. That's
Yeah,
key. Yeah. Also, we want to reframe anytime they say, I can't, with that power of yet,
yeah,
right? So, oh, but it's not that you can't do it, you just haven't done it yet,
yeah,
right? And you can use that yet phrase at any point in childhood, any phase of development, right? Obviously you phrase it differently in preschool than in high school, but that yet word is so critical.
yeah. I think also with it goes along with normalizing the struggle. We've talked about really talking about our day and things as dinner, that kind of like classic what's going on today stuff. But
Right.
you say talk about mistakes you made at dinner and what you learned. So basically, in that time, don't just say all of the great things that happened in the day, but talk about your challenges and how you overcame them.
Right, right. This isn't Instagram, it's not your highlight reel,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, that's such a problem, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Right. We want to point out that we all have failures, especially with, the people that you love the most and can be more vulnerable with. I love this concept of talking about the brain as a muscle. Obviously, that's a metaphor, right? But it's the concept, bringing it alive, of your brain has neuroplasticity and it can get stronger, quote
hmm
unquote, right? With practice, right? So you can adapt your brain to new challenges and it can always get better.
I
So I
want
love
my
that.
I want my brain to have abs. Kind of.
I love that. It'd be like a beach body.
Yeah, beach body. Yes, absolutely. Next one here is to watch your own mindset, because kids
Yeah.
absorb what you model, not what you lecture to them. And this is such an important one for a lot of folks, because I think a lot of people have grown up without that mindset that they
Oh,
can change
gosh.
or improve, and that failure is a problem. So make sure that you're doing that self work too. And honestly, if you do that, I would imagine you'll notice things in your own life feeling a little bit differently beyond just what you're modeling for your kids.
Yeah, this isn't just a lesson for kids, it's for adults too. Let's
Yeah.
definitely be clear on that. Yeah, and also like you can talk about failure as much as you want, but if you're not like practicing that in your day to day, your kids will pick up on that, and they'll
Yeah.
have mixed messages there. So you want to be consistent
I think
about
that's
your failure.
a lesson you need to learn about playing Mario Kart. Courtney doesn't want to play Mario Kart because she knows she's going to lose.
See, I have a fixed mindset. What can I tell you? I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us. Yes. And then, of course, we want to avoid rescue mode, right? So you want to let your kids sit in that frustration whenever possible, and allow them to struggle a little bit. Of course, you don't want them to have huge struggles and that lead to like tears and meltdowns. Like there may be a time where you need to step in and help, and we call that scaffolding, right? Giving like structured support, but also letting the child struggle a little bit too, so your child and you can kind of figure out where that balance is for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
And some important notes here, as we talked about, if you have a neurodivergent kid, obviously like our child with ADHD, sometimes, they feel things more deeply than other kids, and they might need more structured supports than a neurotypical kid, right? Or if you have a child, let's say with like a learning disability and they really struggle to read, this power of yet might not apply to them in all aspects. They're going to need support, and you don't want to just sit there and let them fail, right? But you want to kind of understand where is that line that they can do it, or where's their like, we call that like an independent level, where can they function independently without support? And then you push them a little bit into things that they struggle with, so into that like frustration mode, but you want to be able to support them and jump in more so than like a neurotypical kid. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yes.
Okay, I really want to stress that. We don't want our neurodivergent kids to really struggle without supports. They do need more supports and different types of supports. So that's really important.
Yeah, I would love to dive deep into what those supports are in another episode.
Yeah, that's great. Let's bookmark that. And then finally, tools. So I would love to link some tools. Can we do that?
We can absolutely do that.
Okay. But there's some books that I love, especially for kids and more so young kids. You can have these conversations with teens, and I think they can understand the concept. But with young kids, it's helpful to kind of narrate that concept and have it be about somebody else rather than about themselves. Because as we talked about, kids don't love the spotlight on them necessarily, but they can learn from other kids and other stories.
Yeah.
So I love The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes. That's a great book, especially about girls, because that tends to be like gender normed, especially for girls to be people pleasing and to, not make mistakes, or, a lot of girls don't try like in math historically too, because, if it's harder for them, they might not be willing to make those mistakes. So I love that one specifically for girls. Your Incredible Flexible Brain, that's a great book too. And it talks about the different parts of the brain and how they function, and the concept of neuroplasticity, as we talked about. You have young kids, like 3 to 5. I love The Power of Yet. It's a Sesame Street book. Do you remember this book?
I don't know.
It's so cute. It's a poem, but it's like beautifully drawn. And the story is really great, and it's really relatable to preschoolers. That's one we read on repeat at our house.
Huh.
And then, some of the books like Rosie, Revere, I forget what that series is.
Oh, yeah, those are all great. Like, is that Ada Twist Scientist too as well?
Yes. Yeah, so the Rosie Revere one, obviously about a girl who struggles with inventing like a flying machine, but it's kind of like that implicit power of yet. So I love that. And then there's lots of great resources for adults too that we'll link if you want to work on your own growth mindset.
Which you should. Yeah.
I
at some point, maybe I can do an episode on my favorite books and stuff for these types of things. I have too many to list here that I probably want some practice on or some time to gather those things. But there's just so much out there of ways that you can work on yourself all the time.
There is. I typed in failure books for adults on Amazon, just a really generic search, and so many great titles came up. I don't want to recommend any because I haven't read any of them, but they all looked really good. So I'll definitely be checking that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else?
There's nothing else that I can think of really off the top of my brain here. Just I think that modeling aspect of it is so important as you
Yeah.
if you hit home. So if you work on yourself here in these ways, I think by proxy it will also work on your kids, which I guess is a general lesson to learn that I've feel like I've picked up from you.
Yeah, it starts with you, right, as the parent. And again, it's okay if you're not quite there, you're not anywhere near there as far as like having that growth mindset.
Yeah.
Using that within yourself and knowing like I can practice this every day. That's the whole concept right there,
Y-
right? So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, one small step, right?
Right?
There's a book called Kaizen. It's about making one small little step every day,
Oh, okay,
making
great.
one small change towards a larger goal of progress. And it's
I
a
thought you were quoting the great astronaut.
The Great Astronaut. Oh
What's
yes,
his name? Why
oh
can't I come
yes,
up
the
with
Great
it?
Astronaut,
What's his name?
Neil Armstrong.
Yes, thank you. Oh my
Yes,
gosh, that's embarrassing.
yes.
One small step. I did not realize that was a concept. I love that.
Yeah, it's a great book, Kaizen. I'll link that up. So before we get out of here, I want to say we also have the ability to ask questions on the show. So head on over to phases.fm/questions. We'll have a link in the show notes, as well as if you're watching on YouTube in the video description, you can ask some questions for the doctor. We're going to be doing regular question and answer episodes. That way we can hit the things that you want to hear. And then if there are questions that demand much longer deep dives, we will cover those in entire full episodes for you. So I don't have anything else. Do you, Court?
No, but please submit your questions. There's no bad question. I'd love to answer anything you're interested in. So please check that out.
And they also can be anonymous. So you don't have to submit your name. You can submit a handle. You can make it fun, or you can just submit it anonymously. We do not care. That's all I got, though. We'll catch you next week.
Yes, thank you.